Hello, and welcome to the RubberOnion Animation Podcast. I'm your host, animator Stephen Brooks. I'm the RubberOnion. My co-host on the show is Rob Yulfo, who is relatively famous for being shy on the interview episodes, but you'll hear him. That thing that sounds like the radiator kicking in every now and then, that's actually his voice. I alter it digitally so it sounds fakely like words for your listening benefit. This week, we have a special interview episode. We are talking with...
This is Joel Furtado, and you're listening to the Rubber Animation Podcast.
That's right. Joel Nelly Furtado. I added Nelly. It's getting hot in here. So many references! You'll know Joel Furtado most recently for his X-Men Danger Room Protocols fan animated series, which was unceremoniously yanked from YouTube, Vimeo, and other destinations due to Marvel copyright claims. On January 25th, 2016, Joel uploaded a cancellation announcement to YouTube, which we discussed here on this podcast on episode 119. It's fine, bros, because of the Fine Brothers thing that was going on at the time, too. It was an interesting show. That video was difficult to watch. As any content creator knows, that is kind of a worse fear type of situation. And we discussed it because it was big news at the time, sure, but also because just a few months prior to that, on episode 103, we had a Hot Cocoa Show, which is kind of our topic dissection episodes for those of you who are new to the podcast, called Copyright and What Animators Need to Know About It. So, this is applicable. So why now are we just getting around to talking to Joel? Well, here's what I said on episode 109 about this.
I would love to get him on the show as well and talk to him about this whole thing, but I feel like maybe it's a little too close. Maybe it happened too soon. He probably doesn't want to talk about it just yet, but yeah. I would want to have him on when and if he gets a job, because that's a success story. That's a positive thing. It just, right now, it's just very painful.
Yeah. Yes, because he's a human person who didn't need to be hounded during a very difficult time in his life. So I recently reached out to him to see if he wanted to come on and discuss the situation, some of the technical aspects of how he created that really interesting look of CG blended with pixel art, and what he's up to now. Now, before we get into the show, I want to remind you that if you want to participate in this month's RubberOnion Animation Battle, the topic is mustache problems. I love that topic. And the entries are due at the end of July. Simple rules are 15 seconds or less. Post to Instagram at the hashtag RubberOnionBattle. Can't wait to see them. Special thanks to my patrons on Patreon. If you like this episode and other things, consider pledging there and supporting cool stuff like this. And now for your pleasure and enjoyment, I guess those are synonyms, and education, which many people consider an antonym to enjoyment, but it doesn't need to be. Exhibit A. This episode, I really should write down these intros. It gets weird when I vamp toward the end. Let's just get into it. I want to say welcome to episode 140 of the RubberOnion Animation Podcast. We're calling this one simply our Joel Furtado interview. Enjoy. Have you seen X-Men? Do they still call it Age of Apocalypse?
Yeah,
Age of Aquarius.
Age of Apocalypse. What'd you think?
I thought it was okay. I did a little review on my social media because so many people were asking me for it. I feel like they think I'm some I don't know, voice now in the X-Men fan community. That I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was as bad as the critics kind of slammed it, but it's definitely not the X-Men film I would have made or wanted to see.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I feel that way about so many movies that are out now. People will say it's the greatest movie ever or it's the worst movie ever. And usually when I watch a movie, I go, I could see some of the points, but I can't get on board with this intensity.
Yeah, there was some cool moments, and I can see they were trying to do some fan service stuff in it, but just overall it's a mess. The pacing and the way the plot unfolds and stuff.
Which one's the best? The Days of Future Past? I heard that everyone praises that one as the
I have
the
a soft
one.
spot for X2.
Yeah, I think I would say X2 actually. The more original films I thought were better. I thought Days of Future Past was okay, but they're getting so muddled now with their timelines and all that stuff, and it just gets too complicated.
Oh yeah, I don't care about timelines anymore. There was a time when I was younger, I didn't care about it at all because I wasn't going to keep track of anything like that. Yeah. So when Star Trek Next Generation, they have some things about dimensions and times, and okay, that's fun stuff. As I got older, I started to track all these things. Anytime there's a time travel story, I picked it apart, especially the Terminator series, for instance. You kind of pick that stuff apart. Now I've come full circle. Now I don't care anymore. Now it's just Just make it fun. It was fun though. Apocalypse. What'd you think about Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse?
It was pretty bad. I don't know. It was okay, but it wasn't like nearly what it should have been. I feel like they went in such a weird direction with the character, and I know initially there was so much internet hate when they showed these like stills of him, like they were comparing him to Ivan Ooze, Power Rangers, and all these things. But I always give it the benefit of the doubt because I work in this industry and I know how much work goes into the post and all this other stuff. So I figured that they were going to still do a lot of stuff to him and change his voice and do whatever. But even in the final film, it was a little bit rough.
Yeah, they went different. I mean, they went different. I kind of went middle of the road with a lot of this stuff, but I have that nostalgia for the X-Men animated series, the 92 cartoon. Like he yelled, sure.
A lot.
In this movie, he like screamed. Like he said, I will just...
It's either that or he's whispering.
Right. In the original cartoons, the rocks of the eternal shore crash against me and be broken. It's very Shakespeare-esque, and his line delivery was really over the top.
He's dramatic.
But I liked that. I kind of wanted to see something along those lines. But the Age of Apocalypse, it was weird that they call it that and then have absolutely nothing to do with the story in the comics. I mean, at least Days of Future Past had a very similar storyline. They changed up who time traveled and things like that, but, whatever. I don't know. I thought it was all right. It was fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans hate it now because the characters in the movies have gone so far away from their comic counterparts, Like now Mystique is like the leader of the X-Men and she's leading the team. All this kind of stuff the fans hate because it's such a departure. But it doesn't bother me that much that they would do something completely different with the characters. It's almost like someone else's interpretation of the X-Men universe and they're doing their own thing.
Right.
And, representing them how they want. But it would be cool, though, now that we're seeing all these Marvel-branded films that are very close to the comic books, it would be cool to see an X-Men film that is true to the characters and the stories of the books.
God, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Not really taking so much liberties, that Bryan Singer is taking.
It's such a weird world. I was talking recently to someone about the split and how, Fox has the rights to, even the word mutant, adamantium, for instance. So, like, Captain America's shield is not just made out of vibranium. In the comic books, it's a vibranium adamantium alloy. But in the movies, it's just straight up vibranium because they don't have the rights to even say adamantium in that world. Yeah. And it's a little thing, but it's weird to see stuff like that up on the big screen. Just know that behind the scenes, the whole reason was just because of this strange rights for TV, but not for movies. And, it's a weird balancing act. Sure. I also found out that Saban Entertainment was the one who did the production of the original cartoon. I didn't know Disney bought Saban in like 2002.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either.
Saban?
What's that?
Saban?
Mighty Power Rangers? It comes full circle back to Ivan Ooze.
I'm used to calling it Saban. Wait, Saban? Was it?
Is it Saban? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It looks like it's Saban.
Saban, VR Troopers. I remember the announcers saying it that way.
Okay, all right.
Saban, Private Brian.
Well, they said Deke at the end of it, but we all called it Dick. Dick Entertainment. That's it. We're excited talking about these things. Let's not take over this thing. This is an interview, buddy. We're not the stars of the show here. We'll say it in the intro. We're talking with Joel Furtado. I was just wondering if you want to tell people a little bit about yourself and your background before we continue talking about, I guess, more comic books.
Sure. So I went to school for animation. I did a degree at Emily Carr here in Vancouver. And then from there, I went to work in video games almost immediately. Did a little bit of TV stuff in the beginning, movies, I think, in my first year. But kind of got pulled into video games because it's such a huge industry here in Vancouver. I've been working in video games now about 14 years, maybe, in various roles, mostly as a character animator, concept artist. And then recently I was a studio art director for 4 years. Most recently, since the X-Men project was canned, I'm working with Marvel again on their mobile game Contest of Champions as a character animator.
Now, did that happen as a result, or is that just incidental?
That's incidental, yeah. But maybe a combination of the two. I know a lot of people at the studio, but it was it definitely helped that I have this huge passion for Marvel based stuff, and my portfolio and my Instagram is just full of sketches of comic characters and all that kind of stuff. So it's in my wheelhouse for sure.
You brought up X-Men Danger Room Protocols. Obviously, we got to talk about that. That's like the big thing. It's unfinished. We talked about it on, I think, episode I forget which episode exactly it was. I think it was 109. It's Fine, Bros. That was the name of the title because it was the whole Fine Brother thing as well. Maybe in like a rapid fire segment or something. We talked about the fact that this was a series that was upcoming, and we were going to talk about it when it came out. The first episode was uploaded, and it got taken down before I had a chance to see it. The next thing I saw was your video explaining that it had been canceled. So if you want to do maybe a quick kind of recap. I mean, I'm sure you've been asked this like a bunch before, but instead of me explaining it to other people, if you want to do a quick recap of kind of like what happened and maybe where the story left off, let's say.
Well, yeah, so I'd taken a year off to make this project just as a personal decision. I just wanted a break from work. And, I have all these animation projects I would love to do. And the goal of the project was for me to build enough audience and get enough people supporting my work that I could eventually do my own personal projects. So I worked on this project and I had mapped it out so that I would have half the project completed when it launched, so that as those episodes were launching, I would have time to complete the rest of the series. So
as a buffer, right?
When it launched, that was a huge risk in and of itself. I mean, I never had permission from Marvel or anything like that. They didn't know that I was making this project. But I thought because I was releasing it on YouTube for free, it wasn't like commercially funded. It's not making money on YouTube. All these kind of factors that it wouldn't be a big issue for them. I thought if anything, they would just be happy advertising their brand for them for nothing. The intro actually went pretty viral. I did a lot of like interviews and it got out there quite a bit. And it was a lot of work on our part, to get it out there and get the media involved and stuff. So that first week I was just doing like PR nonstop all day.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, Marvel got in touch. They were kind of vocal that they didn't want the project to go through, but even if I did go through with it, there's a chance it could still be left alone and there's a chance it would be taken down and stuff. So I decided, I may as well go through with it. I'd already gone that far. So if it gets taken down, it gets taken down. But at least I had to try. So I released the first episode and then I think within 24 hours it was like removed. So then I tried putting it on other websites. I put it on Vimeo and like Dailymotion and stuff, and all those were shut down to the point where my accounts on those channels were completely shut down. So I can't access the channels or the emails associated with the channels.
Wow, really?
So my YouTube is still shut down, and that was like a while ago. That was in January. I still can't post videos on that YouTube channel or access any of that stuff. So
from one strike?
No, because I had multiple videos. I had like the intro video, and then I had uploaded an episode, and I had other videos too that were leading up to it. So they just had to rip 3 as copyrights.
Wow. Oh no! Yeah. Okay, I see.
Yeah, because I had multiple like individuals. So in hindsight, like I think part of the problem too is I just like in the intro video I announced this segment after it where I told people about what the project was and what I planned for it, and it was like this 18 episode series, and I showed clips from the other episodes and stuff, and showed all this artwork, and I think it just looked like too much that I kind of think maybe scared a few people. And also I had like a landing page with all this artwork and stuff to the project.
That's really interesting. We had an interview with a guy, Rob Pratt, R-O-B-B, P-R-A-T-T.
O-B-T-T.
He was the one who did Retro Superman, the classic Superman, the Bizarro Superman classic. He did also Flash Gordon classic. He did those animated shorts. When he did the first one, apparently Warner Brothers, he spoke with them and they said, oh, this is cool. This is, well done. It looked really cool. It was a one-off thing. When he did his second one, he said it on the interview. Rob, maybe you want to check what episode that was. He goes in for a second meeting. He paraphrased it as, I mean, they're good, but you can't keep doing this. That was the second short that he did. So obviously that's why he went on and he did Flash Gordon after that. Yeah. And I wonder if there's something about that serialized, something that they can kind of dismiss, but series or something that looks...
Episode 85.
Episode 85. Yeah. I do like my round numbers. As this one will be episode 100 and I guess 40, because I like my round numbers for special episodes, and you're a special episode, so you get 140.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a very similar type scenario.
Yeah. Now you weren't associated with Marvel prior to that, right? Like, so when you got the email, was that just like, were you expecting something like positive from it? Like, this is great, we want to hire you?
I was actually really excited. Like, I got a message. Yeah, I probably can't get into too much details, but I did get a message from them, social media, and then I thought it was a good thing. I thought, oh wow, they actually maybe want to like promote this or get involved in the production. But I thought too that they probably just wanted to get eyes on it before I released it. Like, they wanted to make sure, because I mean, they do have to confirm that it's like in line with their brand and it's not going to be like brand damaging, or there's not going to have some like extreme violence or whatever like thrown in there.
Sure.
So I thought that they just wanted to maybe see the episodes and just get a sense of like what I was actually doing, but they never saw the episode. So they didn't. That wasn't the issue.
Have you heard of the fan film Star Trek Axanar?
I got compared to it a lot because it just happened. I think like maybe a month before. Something like that. Yeah,
it's a strange situation, and I think it's kind of in line with that. I was going to say Saban Entertainment being brought out by Disney thing, like being all under the same roof. Rob, have you heard of that?
I don't think I have. Maybe if
It's a weird comparison because it's completely different in many ways. The first one, the major one, is that they started by doing a proof of concept trailer, raised $100,000 and showed it at Comic-Con. So number one, right off the bat, that's a big production.
Yeah.
You did it on your own with some help from others, but I mean, it was all self-funded. You did everything. You did all the art.
The only other people who were involved was the sound. So I had a composer doing original music, and then I had a sound designer doing sound, but I was paying them out of pocket. So, it wasn't like crowdfunded or
because this Axanar then went on to raise $638,000 on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
To then produce a full film, which... I mean, they should have known. It's a massive difference.
That was. So I was getting compared a lot to them, and that actually bothered me a little bit because it was like, how can you compare me? Like I didn't raise like $500,000.
When we talked about the story to begin with, like we did a whole episode on copyright and fan art and things like that. Was and so we kind of had to address it and talk about it. But there were so many people throwing their hat in the ring. Like everyone was an expert when this happened. Everyone in the comment sections and even in blogs were given their editorial, but I don't know if they did a lot of research on what exactly was meant by copyright infringement and IPs and why fan art existed and why it's sometimes allowed to pass through. The one thing that wanted to do when we were talking about that is to kind of like temper some of the flames of people. Why would he do it? Like why wouldn't you do original work? Why didn't you spend a year doing original work? Mainly because it is really difficult. Like that to artists, to animators, that's such a stupid question because it's an obvious answer. Because it's almost impossible to get a following off of an original project. It could just fall dead. You weren't doing something like this, like raising the money off of Kickstarter. You were doing it on your own. I didn't want to say that the most fun thing that I found out is that when that lawsuit went through, CBS and Paramount sued the Axanar thing, apparently the group said, well, we want to know exactly what elements are being infringed on, because I guess in the actual lawsuit it said innumerable copyrighted elements of Star Trek, and so they thought they were being smart, show exactly what it is, and then CBS and Paramount amended the lawsuit with 28 pages of listed out copyright infringement.
I should have demanded that too. I want all the details.
The real end to that was that it was just recent. It was just last month. Justin Lin, who's the director of the new Star Trek Beyond, he pressured Paramount to come to a resolution. And he said it was because he was a fan. But really, I mean, let's be honest. It's he doesn't want there to be a black eye on Star Trek while his Star Trek movie comes out. And Star Trek fandom has a lot of fan films and things. There's a long history of that, just like there is with comic books. The difference there, obviously, with money, huge productions, feature-length film, there's massive differences. But the other difference seems to be this thing that we brought up earlier about the dubious ownership of the rights to X-Men being, in some ways with Marvel and Disney, in some ways with Fox, whereas the Star Trek one, it was able to kind of be worked out, I guess, because it was all under the same umbrella. Right. It was all CBS and Paramount.
Yep.
And this is kind of where I think the complication comes in, just dealing with one thing.
Right.
And you brought up a point about the Avengers on the pre-call. I didn't know if you wanted to make that here.
I mean, it's hard to say like 100%, but if I had done it about anything that wasn't X-Men and something that was in Marvel's best interest, like say I did a Doctor Strange series for the movie coming up or Avengers or whatever, if I had done this about any other IP in their brand, it probably wouldn't have gone this way. Like worst case scenario, they would have just found some way maybe to release it through them, and I would have tweaked it and changed things and to fit their, I guess, brand or stories or whatever. But it wouldn't have been canned altogether, I don't think, in the same way.
Did you have any conversation with them about the idea that maybe it was too close to the source? Like if you had done something completely different that was obvious, it couldn't possibly be canon. It couldn't possibly be produced by Marvel, because the weird thing is that fan art seems to be weirdly susceptible to stuff like this because it's so close to the source material. And you do that because you love it.
Yeah.
But that makes it slightly weaker in the legal front because it's kind of indistinguishable where the average person just following up on YouTube would look at it, and it's produced it, not to just prop up your ego, but it's produced at such a high level that you would look at it and go, it seems official. It seems like it could be something that would be produced from Marvel, which I think from your perspective would be like, oh, great, maybe they'll catch it on and promote it, just as other things have been done in the past. But this was a very unique situation that you happened upon because of the rights being, one way or the other, that Marvel themselves weren't really able to jump on it and say, okay, we'll take this and promote it as our own. Like, they could have bought it, but they didn't because of the weird rights distribution.
Yeah, because it would have been in Fox's best interest. They had a movie coming out in May. This was in January.
Right.
So from January to May, it would have just built up all this nostalgia and resurgence in X-Men fans, and then the movie would have came out. That would have been probably a better ad campaign than anything they had going for them, to be honest.
Than Ivan Ooze? Yeah.
So, but obviously that's not Marvel's best interest. There's a reason that X-Men Apocalypse has no merchandising products whatsoever, or any kind of anything even close to what any other superhero movie this year has, out in terms of products and things, So they're kind of strangleholding that whole market around X-Men. This obviously wasn't their best interest to have out in the market.
What happened when you got that message, like in the days afterward? I said on that podcast that I wanted to have you on. I wanted to talk about it, but I didn't want to talk about it right away.
Yeah.
Seeing that video, I just sympathized with your situation. Like, I wouldn't want to be hounded. And the other thing was, if you think about it as like a 3-act movie, Act 1 is making the series.
Yeah.
Act 2 is getting shut down.
The depression.
I wanted there to be an Act 3 before we, before we talked.
Yeah.
So what's Act 3 look like?
Well, I'm working again. But actually,
that's good. Yeah, that's right. The end of the video was saying, look, if anyone's hiring.
The difference now is even though the project lasted a week, I was still able to sort of capitalize on the exposure and the audience and stuff, and I'm still building audience actively, which is something I never did before or worried about. Like prior to the series, I didn't have anybody on social media. I didn't really have like a internet presence or anything like that. Actively, I'm like pursuing that more, posting like animations and artwork like every single day for the last 6 months. So that's been going really well. And then, of course, like working again in the studio is good, and hopefully building a better relationship now with Marvel. Now, like working on their products and being like involved. Yeah, hopefully that.
Have you talked to the same people, the ones that you had the same contact with?
Yeah. And
that's going well?
I can't really talk too much about it, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, it's we're just frenemies now. We're not enemies.
I see.
Frenemies. We're moving up. We might be friends soon.
They're aware of you posting the things in increments on Instagram.
Yeah. Even that too is a tricky situation, because as an artist, I'm allowed in my portfolio to put my animation work. So somebody can't necessarily tell me, you can't have a demo reel like online that has clips from this X-Men project, because my demo reel would have clips from this X-Men project.
Right.
So in that vein, I wanted to upload like little clips just as like demonstrations of portfolio and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But they were unfinished. A lot of people thought I was uploading the episodes in full, but I wasn't. I was uploading sequences in little 15-second clips, but they don't have sound, and they weren't totally finished in terms of animation and stuff. I don't consider them like a finished product, but it is a way for fans to get a glimpse at like what was upcoming in the project.
Well, what about the animation itself? Because in a weird way, we had brought up this thing about doing fan art things. You want to get a following, and then maybe after that, you would have gone off and done, original series. Just kind of threw a wrench in it. But in the podcast, in this episode, we're kind of doing the same thing. Everybody wants to know about the situation. Everyone wants to discuss it. But it is an animation podcast. And what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about the animation itself, because there's a lot of questions I had about the production of it. Like, I have questions about the pixel art and specifically the special effects, because they look pretty unique with the 3D design. So what was your process in coming up with the style, number one?
So initially, I wanted to come up with a style that visually, like for someone to just look at it, it says 90s, because the X-Men era I was doing was the 90s X-Men. So initially, I'd done some tests of just like straight up 3D animation, straight up 2D animation, and all those kind of had too many limitations. Like, to do a total 3D production would have been too hard for me because I had too many characters, too many unique characters. So for me to model, rig, even just to prep up 30 characters or however many were in the project, I would have been working on the pre-production for like over a year. So I thought I had to come up with something that like I didn't just use full out 3D, but then I could use a little bit of like mixed media, and then And also it had to have a visual style that really harkened back to the 90s. So for me, that was like a lot of those old video games I used to play on like Genesis, like X-Men, and playing
right.
Capcom's
See, that's what I
old,
thought,
like,
yeah.
you know, the Children of the Atom arcade game that came out. I was like obsessed with that. I wasted a lot of quarters playing that. So I wanted to kind of have that visual style, but with traditional pixel art, you're really limited based on, you know, the camera moves you can do and certain kind of, I guess, treatments and stuff with camera. So what I ended up doing was I would model like reference models, and they were pretty generic. They wouldn't have like a ton of details, but if the character had some kind of, you know, special detail like wings or whatever, I would just add in a proxy model of what that would be, and then I'd animate those, rotoscope that. And in the process of rotoscoping, I would add just straight up 2D animation for things like capes or hair, anything that needed to be fluid. And then I would also add sort of the timing of 2D animation. Like I would remove a lot of the 3D, you know, it's not 30 frames per second kind of thing. I would just time it out the way I would animate in 2D and then add all the kind of like smear frames and, you know, blurring and stuff like that as a rotoscope on top of it. But it was really
And what programs did you use to what was the balance, the workflow that you had between the programs?
I'm using Maya for all the 3D stuff pretty much, with a few other programs that I use like 3D Code sometimes and a few other ones, but mostly it's all done in Maya. For the 2D animation, I would use TV Paint, and then for a lot of the stuff, I would just do directly in Photoshop, like a lot of the pixel stuff. And then I use After Effects for all my compositing and a few other programs here and there.
I really enjoyed the special effects animation. In my mind, I'm thinking the X-Men fighting arcade game. But I think that stuff, it's very Japanese animation style with the way that the blasts are done. And I just want to know, like, do you have like any background in that? Did you use any reference? Or did that just come naturally?
So some of the effects, I probably animated like 60% of them, and some of them aren't my animations. Some of them are packs that you buy. Like the one animator I use a lot, his name's Renad. He sells like 2D animation effects packs. So I would use those for like generic things. They're very kind of generic, like looping animations. So, you know, I found in the project, there's so many specific shots where I could never use stuff like that I would have to animate myself. But anytime I had to do little kind of like, you know, a little burst of smoke or a little whatever, I would use those animations as well. I think the more complex shots, like the ones you're talking about, there's like a crazy shot where like Jean Grey turns into Phoenix, and that was like a crazy effects shot. All those ones I animated. Yeah, I mean, I am a huge anime fan. I do try to keep that like energy. I think when it comes to effects animation, they definitely craziest, like, you know, off the wall like effects animation.
What's your go-to with animation? What are your influences there?
I don't know, a lot of different sources. I like a lot of international animation. Like my favorite animation right now comes from France, I'd probably say. I think they have like the best 2D animators by far. I do watch a lot of anime, a lot of Japanese, and like Miyazaki is one of my favorite animators. I love his films.
Yeah.
And then of course a lot of Western animation. A lot of my friends were in 3D animation at Disney and DreamWorks and stuff. So I love all that kind of stuff too. It's great for what it is. But it was interesting doing the project that the general consensus when people see this art style in particular is they think it's like the easiest, lowest kind of animation style you can do, you know? They see pixels and they're like, oh, that's great that you did pixels, but it'd be awesome if you could like raise up the quality and make it, you know, this or whatever. Because I think in people's minds it's like pixel animation, then 2D animation, then 3D animation. You know what I mean?
Oh,
the way they kind of like visualize it. So I realized like this is actually in a way than if I had probably just done it like 3D high end and do this fancy shaders and renderers and stuff, which I know how to do. Like I thought this would be a lot less work, but the whole rotoscoping process and everything, it was like pretty crazy. And I'd never done pixel animation specifically. So some of the effects and things are just straight up pixel animated, and it was like pretty difficult. The first few months I was really slow, and I sort of had to ramp up to my process and pipeline and stuff.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, because when I saw it, the thought that I had was, how does he get that look? Because it looked very cohesive. It didn't look like it was all over the place. There was parts that I was questioning. Am I seeing hand-drawn stuff just because that's what I do? Like, am I seeing that in my brain? So it's strange. I think sometimes when you're an animator and you look at something, you kind of break it down. But yeah, in general, people looking at something from the outside going, oh, it's nice, but did it need to be like a little video game? Like, no, that's what I was going for, though.
Yeah, sometimes I hate being an animator because I see stuff like this and you just start breaking things down instead of just enjoying the product. You know, what's his secrets? And you just got to compare it almost to like cutting a field of grass with a nail clipper or something. It's just how long it would take to do that. Do you like other personal projects? Do people expect it to look like that? Like the pixelated look and the video game kind of look to it, or
yeah, it is weird actually. So since then, I have been doing a bunch of little clips. I'm doing a series now of little like looping animations for Instagram, where it's literally like a 4-second loop of a character, because that's stuff I can easily tackle. You know, that isn't this like huge project, but and I am doing it in that same style But now I'm not using any 3D animation. I'm just doing it all 2D. Yeah, so I kind of feel like now because of this X-Men project, maybe people know me for that visual style.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy it too. Like, I love the look of pixel animation, so I'm sort of still maybe refining the process and figuring out like better ways to.
Do you still have people going, do more X-Men?
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually,
right.
anytime I post other content, like I did one of Tracer from Overwatch this week.
Oh,
and
I saw
the
that.
comments
I
are
saw
literally
that.
They're like, just do X-Men, more X-Men. Like, oh my god, it was canceled in January. Leave me alone.
That defines the internet
Yes.
for me. I mean, it's for like content creators. It's just do this thing that I know.
I had to kind of pull away too. My first instinct always was to answer people's questions and correct their like misconceptions. Because there's so many
Right.
people where someone will ask a question and someone else will answer them with something that isn't accurate at all, about the process or
Right.
about how how it was made. And in some cases I get mad because it'll be something where someone will ask, oh, where did you get all these sounds? And someone else will say, oh, he just took them from the 90s cartoon. Or I didn't. I had like a sound artist
Just
recording all the
speaking for you.
sounds and like doing stuff, and a composer like creating original music for the episodes. And so that kind of stuff's frustrating because it's a lot of work that people put in that, is just being overwritten by somebody who doesn't know and is just answering other people, But that happens so much that I had to just pull away and just, I couldn't respond to all those questions and comments, and you just have to let it go, and people will say what they want and come to their own conclusions.
Do you feel like you have something now at the end of this? You can look at it as a positive thing. I mean, obviously, you find a way to kind of turn it into something. I mean, of course, you're going to take something out of it. But
Yeah.
what do you think that you learned throughout the whole process?
I learned a ton about launching, actually.
Oh, interesting.
So my partner has his own PR company.
Mhm.
That was definitely helpful because he would like advise me on the launch and how all the things I needed to do prior to launch in terms of media contacts and all that stuff. Yeah, just getting everything in order on all my social media. Everything was like ready to go. And what I did for people who might be thinking of doing something like this is I would set up like a document basically, and I would go to all the websites that I wanted to target, which would basically video game websites, comic book websites, animation websites, sort of my trifecta. And then I would go to articles relating to either X-Men stuff or stuff to do with things that were like this. I'd find out who wrote the article, and then I would find their contact information somewhere through their Twitter, through their personal website, through the website itself that they were posting articles to. So I had this massive list of like 100 authors basically who just write for these type of websites that I like. And then when the series was launched, I like mass emailed all those people and tweeted them directly in hopes that they would then write about it. Because as soon as you kind of get the ball going, then it just blew up like overnight.
Now, did you email them in one email, or did you do that one of those like BCC?
I was using MailChimp to do all the emailing, and that was also how I was housing. So I had one email list.
So you set up your own newsletter essentially.
I had a newsletter for people
Interesting.
subscribing, because that's the most important thing too. Like I've worked in mobile games for a little while, and the most important, valuable thing from customers is an email address. So capturing emails is worth like, I can't remember what the dollar figure is, but a follower on Instagram might be worth like a cent or like less than a cent to you in terms of like how much they will spend on your product over the lifetime of it. But an actual email is worth like, I don't know, $6-7 or something. So in comparison, social media followers aren't as valuable to you as a producer and a content creator as, capturing emails. So I had the launch page strictly just to capture emails, which went really well as well. So I had a MailChimp an email list, and then I also had the media author list, which I was just using to contact them about, interviews and, announcing future content. That ended up working really well.
That's interesting. So the media members actually got an individual email. Like they weren't put on blast. They got an individual email, but you sent it to them, a form, basically.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing a little bit of like what what type of information you say? Like,
it's just a typical like press release kind of thing. I just told them I created this project. I thought it would be up their alley, like a little bit of information about me, a little bit of information about the series. And if they wanted more information, they could contact me. And so a lot of them ended up contacting me for interviews and stuff. Once you get sort of the bigger websites too, I feel like it just spreads on its own. And I'd found that like I'd done a video a few years back now, but it was just like a one-off trailer of like a Zelda game. And I think overnight it got 1 million views on YouTube from like the similar process. Like I just sent stuff out to game websites, and all these major game websites picked it up. And then from there, it just like waterfalls to all the blogs and all the other sites. And that was actually part of the reason that when I did this project, I didn't think anything would happen. Like nothing happened after that. I never heard from Nintendo.
Oh, you're talking because of the Zelda. You did the Zelda thing.
Yeah, I did the Zelda trailer. Nothing happened. It got way more views than the X-Men intro did.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was surprised because the X-Men intro, I was actually disappointed when it launched that it didn't get more views. But just based on the Zelda thing, I'm like, oh, X-Men's way more popular. They have a much bigger audience. It'll do way better. You know, it crosses more markets and stuff. So, But anyways, back to your original question. Yeah, I learned a ton about launching a product and a series and like just how to get it out there. So I think in that way, it wasn't a failure. And I was able to see, even in a week, what the amount of email subscribers, the amount of subscribers to my YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff in 1 week was pretty crazy. Like everyone I knew who does that type of work was telling me that was like insane numbers, you know, to hit in a week. So
the YouTube page that you can't use anymore.
Yeah. Or no, you're banned for 6 months. So I don't know. It's probably
is it? It's a standard thing.
Yeah, but after 6 months, you have to do a course on like conduct and copyrights. It's some online course, and if you hit all your multiple choice buttons correctly or whatever, I'm assuming, then you're.
Do you have videos on there that are being monetized and stuff, or is that like on a hold when they take you away from your channel?
My assumption is they would take a hold on. They would stop all monetization during that time, right?
I've never monetized a video on YouTube, but
never. Okay.
Yeah, not none of this stuff was monetized. So I mean, I imagine they would if you had like a channel with tons of videos. If you've been doing this a long time, I mean, that would have been really damaging if this was a channel that I had run for multiple years and then all of a sudden did this project and now it was completely shut down. So thankfully that didn't happen.
But you're able to kind of parlay some of that stuff over into, like you said, the social media stuff. I mean, when you started the Instagram, that was new, right? That was a new account. You would just open that up.
Yeah, like when the project launched, I think I had a couple on Instagram and now I have 20,000. Yeah. And that was only, in January, end of January. So
that is serious growth.
Yeah.
And when did you start your Patreon, by the way?
It launched with episode 1.
So January.
Yeah.
How are you liking it? Are you liking Patreon?
Oh, I never ended up using it.
Oh,
I just left it alone because initially the Patreon was going to be for people to get access to like original artwork, to get access to tutorials and stuff like that. So I had actually I'd already filmed like 2 hours of tutorial videos. They were little like 15-minute to 20-minute episodes. And each one would sort of tackle a different topic. So usually the first episode, the only one I ever released, the first one was just a general video showing the whole process. But then episode 2, I think, was just about like posing and sort of silhouettes and getting the best out of your characters in that way. And then I did one on effects. I did one on like compositing. I went into like details of the production.
So why didn't you ever upload those?
I think because once the project was canceled, I thought it was maybe, I don't know, it would just create more problems because the tutorial videos were still showing content from the episodes and breaking down shots and stuff, but from episodes that hadn't been released. So, I mean, I could probably still do those because in the vein of it being like an educational animation tutorial.
Yeah, that sounds very protected in my opinion, because a lot of that stuff is protected. One of the things of fair use is educational purposes.
Yeah,
I mean that's one of the pillars of the fair use defense. Yeah. So that seems like that would be well protected under that. Plus, I mean, if it's you, your voice, your face, and everything, it's obvious that you're doing it.
I would definitely understand. Like I would think after email, like Stan Lee would show up to my house with 2 henchmen. He's like, you just don't learn.
He does all the dirty work for Marvel.
Break his fingers, boys. They're cracking their knuckles.
Yeah.
Excelsior.
That was my main fear.
A thugged out Stan Lee.
Stan Lee nightmares just stopped like 6 weeks ago.
Mobster Stan Lee.
They're just holding your arms back and he's punching you very slowly. He's he's kind of old.
That's cool though. Having the tutorials, that would be really unfortunate if you never got to release those.
Yeah.
Those are right in line with what you do. You're an animator. Yeah. You put a lot of effort into this project, and I think if maybe you reach out, maybe talk to them and see if they have anything against that. You're not showing the final product.
Right.
You're just showing individually, this is how you do this and this is how you do this. And I don't think they'd have a problem with that, because I think the problem was it's the content, it's the final, it's the entertainment of watching the story that you had progressed and the characters. But it has absolutely nothing to do with the story and characters. It has to do with the entire process of how to do something. It's all, it's going to sound weird, but it's almost, I might cut this out, but it's like the O.J. Simpson book. If I did do it,
it's just like that. Yeah, and it was funny too with the Patreon, because a lot of people came after me for that, saying like, "Oh, I felt bad for him until I saw he was making money on Patreon and like blah blah blah."
Oh,
so for the record,
I
never made money on Patreon. Like nothing was ever released on Patreon, but I was planning to release the Patreon alongside the episodes. in my mind, like that, even though you're technically making money off stuff that's related to the project, at the end of the day, the project doesn't make money. You know what I mean? So the stuff
that's exactly right.
The stuff on Patreon was going to be, people could see the storyboards, or they could see it's all the behind the scenes kind of artwork and production artwork that I did, all my sketches of the characters, and I would do all these kind of layout sheets of just posing and plan out sort of body language of the characters and effects and stuff. So they could see all that and see tutorials, and in the higher tiers they could actually commission me for original artwork too. I was going to do original ink illustrations or whatever and ship them to. So in my mind, all that stuff is fine. There's lots of people who do that on Patreon and do that of licensed characters, like products and characters. So I didn't see that as a huge issue.
So this whole thing about the copyright and the IP and everything, it's still confusing.
Yeah,
it's still uneasy footing where you feel unsure to make a move. Even I guess in that way, if I were in your position, from the outside, it's a bit easier to look at it and go, oh, you should be fine. Yeah. But when you're in it and someone contacts you, it's like, well, yeah, but I
think too, as soon as you add animation, if I were just doing artwork, that's totally different. It's almost like they treat it totally different. As soon as it's an animation where things are moving and talking and they have emotions and they're showing you something, whatever it is, as part of a story, it sort of changes the context. And I think it scares people, at companies like Marvel or Warner Brothers or wherever, that they don't know what you're going to do with those characters. They don't know what you're going to have them say. It's out of their hands all of a sudden. But I think with 2D artwork, it doesn't have that same... I mentioned it in my video too, and the project was canceled. I go to lots of Comic-Cons and stuff, and I'm actually going to be showing at upcoming Comic-Cons too in different places. But, there's tables of people just selling artwork and merchandise and stickers and everything else, and t-shirts, and it doesn't seem to be an issue, right? So where do you draw the line of what's acceptable fan art and what isn't?
Yeah, that's a really difficult topic. We talked about it on that episode, and even that was the reason that's so confusing, at least from what I saw. I spent months putting that thing together, and there was all sorts of conflicting information, but I decided that I was only going to get information off legal sites, because there was a lot of stuff out there that were blogs and art blogs and things that were people saying what their experience was, but there was a lot of law schools and things like that who had case studies, and they have them up online, and I decided I was only going to go with those. And what I found was that the scary thing about fair use is that it's an affirmative defense, which means that, first of all, you only get to defend yourself in court. So someone has to actually bring you to court, and then you stand up there and say, I'm using the fair use defense, which means that you're essentially standing up there saying, yes, I knowingly used this person's IP, but I believe that I am protected because of fair use, and here are my reasons. But of course, that's a long, drawn-out process, and that's why a lot of people don't get into it. Going back to that Axanar thing, that guy, the producer, actually earlier that year kind of shot himself in the foot, Peters, because he said he violates, quote, CBS copyright less than any other fan film. That's kind of an admission of guilt, off the top. So he would have to say something about fan art, because he already said that he's using the IP. But it was a very confusing thing, fan art, where it seemed at Comic-Con and places like that it is infringement, but it's glossed over. It's like in sports, you get media credentials to go cover sports. To go into the locker room and talk to the athletes, they credential you in order to get in there. They don't need to do that. It's a private company. Even though, you know what I'm saying? Even though the reporting is protected outside of a private company, the credentials and stuff is not. So it's a weird gray area type of deal. And they just kind of decide for courtesy and an understanding that even though you might report things that they might not like, they won't revoke media credentials because it's a black eye on them. And I think the same thing kind of works with fan art.
And at the end of the day, it's just up to the company or studio at their discretion to decide what is allowed and what isn't. They might allow tons of fan films, and there is tons of fan films on YouTube of X-Men, of other products. But I guess they aren't on their radar, or they look at them and they know that they're not, I don't know, a threat to their brand or whatever, and they just leave them alone.
I was actually thinking about that recently, preparing for this thing, was that I wonder if animation is actually not a threat exactly, but more of a confusing thing than would be live action fan film. Because you see a live action fan film, and most people would look at that and go, okay, I know that's not official.
Right.
But with animation, it's maybe difficult to find out. So you kind of, do you feel like you were just caught in kind of weird, almost like you were made an example out of, caught up in this really weird margin in between a couple things? Because you did get singled out a little bit. I mean, let's be a little clear on that. There have been people that have been shut down, but I mean, this was...
Yeah, I think that in general, too, companies, and especially studios like Disney, are really clamping down on copyrights in regards to all this kind of stuff. I think in the last few years, we've seen like a big change in that respect. So I think that they're using these big productions. Not that mine was that big, but the Star Trek project is a good example, too. That using them as examples that, to maybe prevent further people from attempting to do this. And like, if someone asked me my advice, I wouldn't advise them to attempt a project of this scope or production without at least talking to the studio first. But
did you get any notes on that from them? Did they say, look, if you had contact?
No, I mean, really, there isn't a way to contact that first place. If I wanted to contact Marvel right now, like, who am I going to contact? Like, even if I go on Twitter or wherever and try to find people in the position who would approve this, they may not ever see my messages or tweets or whatever. Right. It's really hard to get in touch with the right people in the first place. So
I don't know if I've said anything about this on the podcast. Rob, I know that you know that I've had this thing. I had this project years and years and years ago, like this idea for a Nightcrawler animated short that was telling one little interesting part of his history that I thought was really glossed over in the comic books. There's an interesting storyline that was just it's just brought up, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And then it's pretty much never brought up again. I thought that it would have been a cool idea to do that, and then I didn't do it mostly because it was a big in scope. And then the more that I kind of went along, the more I get a little worried. And I was actually thinking about that when this story came up. I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but I was close to doing something like that. And my thought was, hey, you know what? Maybe if I do this animated short, maybe they'll buy it. Maybe they'll like it. Maybe they'll put it on their website.
It's like my project, X Babies. It's X-Men as babies. And
X-Men babies. They shoot lasers from their eyes.
Well, where it just has like safety scissor blades.
Right, yeah.
Or his rattles.
A lot of people actually suggested that too when I was doing the project, because as soon as you go into parody territory, it's fine. If I had just twisted this a little bit to be a parody, I would have been fine. They wouldn't have been able to pull it down. It would have been clearly like within my rights and fair use and stuff. So people were giving me all these suggestions. One of my friends was saying to call it Why Men, and then it would just be all women. The premise is like, why men?
Oh, interesting. That's a very confusing though, because in my mind I'm thinking Y chromosome, and it'd be the opposite. I'm very,
aggressive, intense.
Yeah, it's so funny the way that works too, because it's almost like parody is very protected.
Yeah.
Satire, strangely, less so, because then the company would argue, well, why did you need to pick my IP? If you're just going to make a general satire of things in general, then you don't need to. Yeah. But parody, if you're specifically making fun of the property, that seems to be really protected. So like in a weird way, the sexy fan art, like the stuff that you brought up, like in a weird way, that's protected because of that. And it's really unfortunate because, and I think we did say at least a little bit on the copyright episode, which I can't remember. It was episode 110 maybe, or I don't remember. Rob, look it up.
Yes, sir.
103 maybe, actually, way early on. Was that it's unfortunate because it's coming from a place where you love it, you appreciate it. At the time that you were doing it, X-Men was in a nexus zone of not really much stuff. I mean, of course, by the time that you finished it, now there was this huge project coming out through Fox. But as far as serial storytelling, I mean, even the last time that we saw Apocalypse was on, I think, X-Men Evolution. Shout out Steve Gordon.
Oh, by the way, that was episode 103.
103, okay. I remember. You had that experience with Zelda. It seems like this would be something that would make a lot of sense. And that's why I said I wonder if, how you felt, because it seemed like the more I thought about it, like it was almost like you were getting made an example out of, in this in particular, which makes animation a very weird place to be.
It wasn't that I didn't know enough too. I mean, prior to even launching, I had gone and met with copyright lawyers, and I had people I was talking to about all that stuff. And then when it was being canceled and Marvel was pulling things down, we were actively meeting, with my lawyers and going over all the options and figuring out what I can do. But the tricky thing is, when you mentioned earlier, under fair trade use, you could argue this in court or go these different routes. But not with YouTube. With YouTube, they just have the discretion to pull your content down. I did argue it over YouTube. I wrote a letter, explained about all the legal things around fair use and everything else. And they got back to me 2 months later and said, oh no, you didn't qualify for fair use and blah, blah. But at that point, I was already working and I had already given up on the project. So I was like, Oh, okay, thanks.
That's interesting because the YouTube thing actually, it goes with the media credentials type of thing because YouTube is a private company, so they take it down. It's not really necessarily a legal thing. I think there are people that try to argue that it's so ubiquitous now that it should be considered something that you can't, that you shouldn't be able to stop someone from uploading unless it's, really actually illegal. And there's a lot of people that are arguing that right now, which is a difficult thing to argue. But when you met with your copyright lawyer, I mean, obviously you can't say everything, but I mean, before you launched, what was the consensus? Was the general advice that this would be covered under fair use?
General consensus was if something did happen, if they were to send me like a cease and desist, they couldn't necessarily go after like retroactive money or anything because I wasn't making money off the project on YouTube and this and that.
True.
So the main concern was that they would send me a cease and desist. That would be like step one. And then their recommendation was I would have to take it down. Under fair use, like I didn't qualify based on like a variety of factors. And even using their logo, which is trademarked and all that kind of stuff. The X-Men thing and the X-Men font and the colors and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but I still went ahead with that anyways because I don't know. I thought I had a good grasp of like internet culture in relation to fan projects and fan art. I see so much of that produced on a daily basis.
Yeah,
and I was like, no, it'll be fine. Like I was never worried that Marvel was going to actually take it down. I think the only thing I was naive about was just the state of the X-Men brand. I knew it was kind of like on the outside of Marvel's business at the moment, but I just didn't realize that they were so aggressively trying to shut everything down to do with X-Men. So that was the only thing. Like if I had kind of had a better understanding of that, I probably wouldn't have gone ahead with
So the general consensus was that you were legally vulnerable, but the idea being that it was not for profit, it was out of love, and you would absolutely love the attention of Marvel and probably would have handed it over or been some sort of, would have loved to have some sort of team up or something. The idea being that this was down the line. You were trying to get some traction out of nothing. That's what we talked about in the podcast when we were talking about your situation was that, look, you want a following. Because it seemed like you were looking at like a different area of your life. You were trying to shift over into something different. And you saw this as like, okay, do this, get a following, make a splash, make an impact, really try to make a substantial move, and then a lateral move into a different area so that you could progress forward. Maybe you saw where you were going was not exactly what you wanted to do. You had ideas for original projects after this?
I do, but now at this point, I don't know at what point I'll get to those. We'll see.
I see. Yeah.
It'll probably be a few years, but yeah, hopefully someday. And just what you were talking about too, in terms of making splash and stuff, like I've found in general over the years, like releasing videos like this, like with the Zelda thing or whatever, as an animator or just somebody trying to like get your work in front of people, it's so much better if you're looking for jobs or other things to do that, to just get your content out, make a splash, get something to go viral. Because then even if those companies don't contact you, when I contact companies, they know who I am, like immediately. When they saw the videos, they were like, oh, you're the guy who did that X-Men thing. We totally saw that. I went around the office. Like I got a lot of that when I was applying for jobs immediately after the project. So
that's great.
That type of stuff, like I could send my portfolio to like 100 studios and maybe only half of them will even look at the portfolio. It just gets thrown in a pile.
Yeah.
But getting your stuff out there in that way where it's really exposed is so good for you in terms of getting a job or a career or something. So in terms of other animators out there, I would definitely say that's a good way to go to make a splash.
We had a question on the Facebook page from Lamont Wayne. He asked specifically if there was any plans for another series, but what he said was, even if not X-Men, an original show in this style would be amazing. So there's another example of someone who sees the style and they like the style. It is a unique style. I have seen other examples of pixel art stuff or things that are rendered out to look like that, or the popular one is cell shading, computer modeled characters that are rendered out to look like they're not necessarily modeled. But the way that it's executed is so well done. Do you have maybe some thoughts of how you can take that style and shift it over into something different? Do you want to continue working salary work, or is the idea eventually, hopefully, down the line to do original work and try to break out that way? I think all animators at some level want that, but I guess realistically,
if I were to like win the lottery and I didn't have to worry about money, I would be probably making my own films. Like that's what I would be doing.
I see.
Unfortunately, it's hard to like pay the rent when you're taking a
hard
year
to win
off
the lottery.
To make an X-Men project that doesn't make any money. So I'm still recovering from that. Yeah, I mean, it would be great to do an original project somewhere down the line, for sure. Like, I would love to do that. Whether it would be in this style or not, it all depends on the content for me. Like, I usually pick an art direction that suits whatever the content and the design and the characters are and all that sort of thing. So this was right for this project. I don't know if it would be right for every project I do.
Yeah, I guess that would be working kind of backwards. Like you have a style and thinking, okay, I got the style. What would work in that?
Yeah.
That is a different kind of way of thinking about it. It's a good point.
Have you tried working on any other goofier looking characters and stuff like that? Or is it easier for you to draw? Because I can't draw muscles for anything. I wish I could do comic book style characters. I'm a lot better at sillier looking four-finger bouncy characters, I guess.
I kind of do a range, to be honest. Like I do, in my career, I had to do stuff that's photoreal style kind of concept art. And then I do stuff that's like, the last company I was art directing for, it was really zany, like almost Saturday morning cartoon style character design. It was really, kind of, I guess I would say goofy, silly, like kind of characters, like very stylized, very extreme character designs. And then I do kind of stuff in the middle, like comic art style. Yeah, I sort of bounce around all over the place. I think that's just because of the jobs I've had over my career, all over the place in terms of like visual style and content. So I had to sort of adapt. And yeah, I do find that's really challenging though. Even being a commercial animator, I'm always amazed that some animators can just switch their style like on the fly to, all of a sudden someone else's like character design style or someone else's, whatever. And you really have to be engrossed in that to be able to animate that.
Do you have any idols that you look up to as far as animation, either their career path or their artistic style or anything like that? Or is it just a hodgepodge?
Yeah, it's a hodgepodge. I mean, it's all the big names of like, Glenn Keane and Don Bluth and Miyazaki and all these kind of big names. Yeah. I look up to a lot of animators like that in film, but I definitely haven't mapped my career path as they have. So, I've never really gone the direction of feature animation or TV animation. So I don't know, maybe that's something I'll still do in my career. But
we recently had an episode that was talking all about virtual reality. We talked to someone who's working in the VR world, and that seems to be something that's really taken off, especially as an emerging market, essentially going from content creator straight to the consumer. There's not a lot of middlemen because it's a brand new thing. Not a lot of middlemen have been able to jump into it yet.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would be interested in? Since you have experience with computer model world, seems to be right up that alley.
Yeah, actually, I almost branched off like years ago with a small startup company, and we had pitched to investors, not virtual reality per se, but at that time it was developing augmented reality for mobile devices, because there isn't really a lot of augmented reality type stuff for iPad and mobile. And at that time, like there was a lot of people demonstrating that at SIGGRAPH and other tech events where they were showing all this new technology around augmented reality. And with mobile, there's so much advantages, and everyone has a phone that already has cameras and already has all these, other apps like Google Maps and things that we can leverage for creating interesting content. Yeah, it didn't end up going through at that time. Like there was a lot of interest, but I think it was just down to like investors wanting too much money, and there wasn't enough going to the startup and varying factors. But it would have been really cool to get into that. It's something I'm definitely interested in, and I have already done a lot of work sort of in that realm, but I've never done stuff specifically in virtual reality, like in terms of Oculus Rift or those type of devices.
Have you ever used it before?
Yeah, I've used the Oculus years ago, though. I haven't used any of the new stuff. I feel like in the last couple of years, it's sort of blown up again. Like now they're all coming out with, Sony has their own device. And it's really taking off now. I think still the price point is too high, and there's still like a level of entry to get into that virtual reality wonderland that is preventing the general public from getting involved. But I think as we move forward, that'll definitely be something that takes off, because I think the experiences that they've come out with already, even in its infancy, are so immersive and so different for people. I think everyone's getting a little tired of the same approach to gaming and console gaming, and it's the same thing. It's kind of nice to have something different.
I wanted to talk about the Canadian animation scene. The difference between Western Canada and like Ontario and Quebec is fairly large. It's a big country and wide spanning, and each places have their own ways about going about spending money. We talk a lot about this because there's a lot of studios that have satellite studios up in Canada, and so it comes up a lot, but we don't actually get a lot of insider discussion, I guess.
Yeah, like I can only really speak to games because that's primarily been where I've worked, but Vancouver has a huge scene for visual effects studios. Like you mentioned, a lot of studios have satellite studios here, like ILM and wherever. Mm-hmm. We also have some TV animation, but there is some feature animation that's done here. Like Sony has a big studio, and there's a few other smaller ones. But gaming, at least when I was coming out of school, was like the predominant avenue to go down. I sort of fell into that because I'd done an internship with Electronic Arts while I was in school, and I took a year off, did a whole year with them, and then they ended up paying for my school if I went back to work for them. So that was sort of the deal with the devil.
Oh, wow. That's big. Can't turn that down.
Yeah, so at the time I was like, okay, like I need my student loans paid, and then I don't have to, look for work immediately after school. I could just, while my friends were trying to make demo reels and send out all this stuff, I was just like able to relaxed, and I knew I was starting at a new job. So yeah, that's how I sort of fell into games. And then from there, your network just expands, Some people left that studio to do a startup company that I went to. And then Microsoft bought us out. So I ended up being at Microsoft for a while. And then you just get pulled around into different networks and stuff. So yeah, but in hindsight, like if I could do it differently, I probably would have gone from the start. If my goal was to be in feature animation and stuff, I would have probably done my schooling in an area like California or something. Create a network in those areas so that I could branch out and do that kind of thing. I think where you kind of go to school and where you start your sort of friends network is super important. I've realized because it connects you to all pretty much every job I've ever had is just because I know people.
It seems to be that commercial and I don't know exactly how to not satellite studio are out east. And then your visual effects companies and your game companies are out west. Is that, I mean, that's reductive, but I mean, that's the general idea that I have of a siren down in the background. I must have missed something major.
I mean, there is some huge studios too out east, like Ubisoft has a huge studio in Montreal and like companies like that. But yeah, I think for the most part, and I mean, it's funny because I've tried at different points in my career to get out of games and go more into like visual effects or film or something. And it's always tricky because, for one, I've almost be starting at the bottom because I don't have that background knowledge of how it's done and the process and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, too, all my friends who work in these different industries, they always just tell me like, "Oh no, visual effects is the worst. Like, don't go. We're like working so much overtime right now." Like, blah, blah. Or friends in advertising firms, it's the same thing. They're doing commercials and they're like, "Oh God, no, it's so stressful. Like, I never see my family." Blah blah blah. So everybody, maybe that's just the consensus. All animators say that, no matter what industry they're in. Like,
right. No matter where you are.
If someone asks me like to go into games, I'm going to say the same thing. No, it's terrible. You're just going to work long hours. And,
Sometimes I feel like when I go to animation events and people are just complaining. I did this recently. I turned to someone, I looked at them, and I went, "So how green is your grass?" Everybody was complaining about the thing that they did.
I think the one thing too, like I thought doing my own work would be a lot better in that respect. Like I would be able to manage my own time and it would be less stressful because I'm doing whatever I want to do. I don't answer to like art directors or producers or whatever. But I found it was almost more stressful. It didn't allow me any like peace of mind or like, I was working all the time, like day and night. So it, definitely didn't let up.
So if you're an animator listener, we actually have quite a few listeners in Canada. They're listening to this right now. If you had some advice for them coming up, let's say that they already graduated school. So let's say you're a young animator in Vancouver and you're looking for the future of your career. Where would you say right now, current state, what would you say is the best option? Where do you go? What do you do?
I would say don't go to, well, again, like speaking solely in video games, I would say don't go to a big studio. I think when I was in school, it was always this dream of like, I want to work at Pixar, I want to work at DreamWorks, I want to work at, Blizzard, I want to work at all these big companies because that's like, then I've like hit the pinnacle, I've like gotten to where I want to be. But I don't think necessarily working at those big studios, when you're actually there working, is like the greatest experience. Well, Pixar is a separate thing. I'm sure it's amazing. But I know for the large game studios, you go work at them and you think it's going to be this like, amazing experience or whatever. But it's usually a little bit disappointing and you realize it's not everything you would be. So I would say going to like a smaller studio that's making quality work, and there's a ton of them now in Vancouver. Like we have a lot of small animation studios doing either like commercial products or doing games or whatever that have really strong art teams, and they're very difficult to get into. But I think even if you could provide an opportunity to like intern at one of those places or provide your services somehow outside of school, that just to get a foot in the door would be your best option. Because those are the studios that are making the most interesting content, like in regards to artwork and design. They're taking the most risks. They're doing the most interesting work, I think.
Is it stable enough to someone to go to one of those smaller studios? Because smaller studios have a tendency to
shut down.
Yeah, exactly. So, going out and getting your foot in the door, you might think, oh, this is great. But if they shut down, now you're on a sinking boat.
Yeah, I guess that's always a risk too. But I don't think that any of these larger studios are free of that risk either. I think the large studios do probably more layoffs than these smaller in general. But I think even if down the road it were to shut down or the product didn't do well, I think even in those small companies, you're able to make better contacts because you're not just able to make contacts with like the little people in your bubble. You're able to make contacts with the people who started the studio and the founders and the other people sort of at the top of the food chain that would be at a larger studio. You would never even talk to those people or be involved with them. But in these smaller studio settings, you're able to sort of demonstrate what you're capable of to people. in those higher roles and sort of get your stuff seen at a higher level. And I think you just make better contacts in that way too. That would be my advice.
I think that's good. Well, the reason that I ask is mainly because every region has its own internal politics, and everything's in flux, but in different ways, you know. So you're basically saying game animation. If you want some stability and you're out in Vancouver area, and I think game animation, that's what you got.
The culture of gaming in general now, there's such a huge influx of indie projects. You know, E3 is starting next week, and a majority of the stuff you're going to see at E3 that gets all the press is going to be indie games. It's not these big, like, AAA blockbuster games. It's a lot of small studios making startup games that are really interesting or have really great art style or are nostalgic or whatever. They're the ones that seem to be getting, like, more and more attention. I think there's, like, a drive for people to want to play these kind of, like, shorter games that are really, like, visually interesting, have different kind of mechanics and dynamics and stuff.
Are you a gamer yourself?
Yep.
Or is it one of those things where you're like, I'm in it, I see how the sausage is made, I don't want sausage?
No, I play a lot of games. This past year, not as much, honestly, like, because of the project and stuff, I wasn't really playing a lot of games, but I typically do. Yeah, no, I am involved.
What are you playing now?
Right now, I'm getting through the new Uncharted game for PlayStation 4, which is, like, visually amazing. And they always have, like, just incredible storytelling and animation and stuff. As an animator and an artist, I spend so much time in those games just looking at everything. Like, it takes me 10 times as long to get through the game because when the story part is complete or whatever, and you're supposed to just, like, walk onto the next section, I just stand there and, like, look at everything and analyze the models, and kind of like what Rob was saying earlier, like, you nitpick everything and, like, how did they get this, like, you know, real-time, like, shadow occlusion and stuff or whatever.
I saw a gameplay footage of it. It looked like a cutscene. It looked like that should not be playable. It looked amazing.
Yeah, we're definitely getting there. Like, in terms of those AAA games, they're getting so close to cinematic quality animation in the real-time gameplay.
I remember watching a commercial growing up with, they were like, get paid to play video games. And it was just like, the businesswoman would open the door and she'd be like, how's it going, fellas? And she's like, oh, you got to tighten up the graphics on level 3, but we're going to keep playing. And it was just like two stoner dudes sitting on the couch. You know,
I know the commercial you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Me too, yeah. It's basically just like
that exact commercial.
Now, do you have, like, stoner guys just come in, play the video games, and sit on the couch there, just sit there with a notepad? And
Beavis and Butthead are your quality assurance team.
This sucks.
Yeah, I was going to say the only job that does that is our QA team. But even then, you're not just, like, playing the game for fun. You're, like, analyzing the specific feature that you're just testing over and over to try and break it.
Yeah, see, I think that would be a nightmare. I mean, I don't know what it would be like, but because there's nothing more frustrating than a debilitating bug in the middle of the game. And even if I'm getting paid to do it, it would drive me nuts, because I would assume, I don't know how the process is, but I would assume you have to do it and then you have to see if you can replicate it. So it's basically like you have to find a bug and then you have to see if you can keep doing it. But that sounds like my nightmare.
As an animator, you get bugs where it'll be like, oh, on this one frame, his finger is actually crashing through his hand or whatever, like in the model. Oh my god, it's playing at like 60 frames a second. Like, if someone sees that, I'll cut them a check and, like, just for their, like, eagle eye precision. But, you know, you get crazy bugs like that where they just analyze everything to, like, find minute details. So yeah.
What's the latest you've worked? Like, I know it's probably time consuming doing these things for your job, so I can imagine just a lot of late hours of making sure that you have to get everything right for presentations and whatnot. Are the hours crazy?
Oh yeah. We actually don't talk to too many people in game animation, so that is an interesting question.
Yeah, it totally depends on the studio. I mean, in the past, I have worked at studios where leading up to a big pitch or 3 or whatever, or even the launch of the game, there's a crunch time which lasts for 4 months or 5 months where you're putting in overtime. But they get you free dinner.
All right.
With the job I'm at now, I've only been there now 4 months, and I haven't really been having to do overtime. It's quite well managed and scheduled and stuff. But I feel like it's a little bit different with mobile games because they release content constantly. There's no the game doesn't just launch and then that's it. It's kind of constantly you're releasing stuff. So the schedule is really easy to maintain, and they know how long it takes to create content. Where I think in console gaming, when you're doing a AAA game, they never really know. You know, they can estimate sort of the different milestones of the project and where you should be, but we sort of get halfway there and we realize, oh, we're nowhere near where we need to be for next month's deadline. So we're going to be working 10-hour days, 6 days a week till we get there. So
what are some of the games that you worked on?
All kinds of games. I mean, for EA, I was doing a lot of sports games. I did Skate, kind of like Tony Hawk. Yeah, all kinds of games. Need for Speed was another big franchise that did a few games for them.
I know that game.
And then Microsoft, we did a lot of just a variety of games. I worked on Halo 4 as an animator. I worked on a bunch of titles for their Kinect when Kinect launched, like Sports Kinect and Star Wars Kinect. Yeah, a bunch of different titles like that. Yeah, when I was an art director at A Thinking Ape, I did a few games that a couple haven't been released yet, but there's a few in the App Store. One's called Smash. It's like a kind of like the old Rampage arcade games. I don't know if you ever played that, where you're a monster that smashes cities.
Oh, I definitely remember
it's
that.
Like in that vein, you like collect different monsters and you destroy cities and stuff. That was a lot of fun to work on.
I remember playing that game on the NES as a kid so much that it was the only game that hurt my thumb. Like I actually
From
got
the rapid button pressing.
Yeah, the only time that happened, I was such a stereotype. Tendonitis in my thumb for doing that. On the episode where we were talking about technologies and virtual reality and thing, one of the things we were talking about was motion capture, and that came off of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine who works as the senior art director at Microsoft. We talked about motion capture. He did a lot of stuff in motion capture. Did you work with motion capture?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah,
I
would help direct our motion capture shoots at EA. Microsoft, actually, we used to do our motion capture shoots in London. We used the facilities at Rare, which is another huge game studio, like just outside of London. It's very different than film. A lot of people think you just take your mocap and then it's like, oh, it's all done. I don't have to do anything. But
right.
The mocap data, like as it's being shot, is like pretty rough. So there's a team of people at the motion capture studio who have to work really hard just to get it to a point where it's like on a skeleton functioning, and then when we get it and we put it onto our models, there's also additional work that needs to be done, to get it looking right in game and blending between all the animations and stuff like that. So it's still a ton of work that goes into it. It's definitely not erasing the ad anytime soon. Yeah.
He was telling the story about how he would at the better motion capture studios, it's like a warehouse, and they would set him up and say, okay, in this particular scene, these guys are driving behind a car, and then a bird comes in, they're trying to swap it away or whatever, and all of a sudden this guy would go into the back room, he'd just hear bang bang bang, zzz, 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 and he would come out with kind of a makeshift car with a wheel and things, so they could actually sit there and mimic it in a way.
Yeah, we had a lot of that too.
It's almost like a play.
Yeah, because you still need something for them to interact with, right? Like on Need for Speed, we had things like that, exactly, like cars, because we'd have cops like throwing a guy over the hood of a car or like doing all this stuff, so we'd have these makeshift weird things. And I remember actually in that shoot, one of our stunt guys, because it's normally stunt actors for shoots like that, they did this big like tackle takedown, and he got up and his arm was like hanging down and his shoulder had been totally dislocated and stuff, and he hadn't even realized. He just like stood up, and we were like, oh, what's with your arm? The markers are all like screwed up.
That'd be amazing to get that motion capture stuff. And, you basically get that motion capture and just be like, oh, something's wrong with the motion capture. Oh no, he ripped his arm off. That's
it's on the ground. And like for the skateboarding game, we had like horse treadmill. Sorry, for them to actually...
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
For a second, I was like, what is a horse doing in a skateboarding game?
Yeah, we used horse treadmills for them to do just getting idols of them like skateboarding back and forth and stuff so that they could actually be on a board. And they were on like a tether and they were just kind of going back and forth because I didn't even know they had horse treadmills. That was like new to me, but it's huge. It's like a huge industrial treadmill for lazy horses, I guess. I don't know. Or rich horses.
There's just a bunch of them set up and they're trotting along on these treadmills, and there's just a big TV in front of them playing Spirit, the Last Sumerian.
But actually, it's normally the mocap teams. They get all kinds of crazy requests and they have to build all these weird props and put together all kinds of weird sets. They'd be kind of a funny job in that respect.
This was a lot of fun. I didn't want the entire show to be on the X-Men thing because you are more than this. That was the idea.
Yeah.
You are more than that. But of course, we had to cover it and go through it. And you were really open and honest and straightforward with it, and I appreciate that. Hopefully, this didn't hurt to relive this. I've given some time from it. You seem like you're in a good place, and that's good. I think it's just good to know that there's kind of a happy, well, I don't say a happy ending, but I mean, it's like I
thought I was like the warning. I'm like the ghost of animation.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
all young animators.
You're
don't do it.
I was gonna say Bob Marley. That's a totally different. You're Jacob Marley. Yeah. You're Bob Marley.
I'm the Bob Marley animation.
I love the idea of a Bob Marley ghost coming in and just singing, "This is your redemption song." And that was a really bad joke. It was a bad joke.
I'll make it worse. You gotta get up and stand up for your right to do whatever you want.
Yeah, fair use.
Yeah. I don't know why I gave Bob Marley that voice, but
Ebenezer, you and I both know I did shoot the deputy. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to give you the floor so you can tell people all of your social media stuff, all the things that you want to plug and for people to follow you.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And if anybody wants to follow my work moving forward, my Instagram and Twitter moniker is Jolieface. You can find all my stuff on there. I still have the Facebook page running for X-Men Injury Protocols, even though moving forward there probably won't be any more updates. But you can see more content there of it. Yeah, that's pretty much it for social media right now.
Do you want to spell Jolieface, by the way?
Sure, it's Joelyface.
If you hear it, it's not entirely intuitive. Mm-hmm. It's Joel, your name, Jolieface. Yeah, okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Angelina Jolie.
No, not Angelina Jolieface. And that'll do it for this episode of the RubberOnion Animation Podcast. Wait! Don't turn away yet. I have to tell you to give me money at patreon.com/RubberOnion. That'll help me continue making cool stuff like this and other things like animated shorts, tutorials, etc. But you can support without giving any money. Hop on over to iTunes and give this podcast a review because it actually really does help. I want to give a huge thank you to Joel Furtado for talking so openly with us about his experiences and putting up with my impression of Apocalypse. You should follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Jolieface. That's Joelyface. I also might as well thank my co-host, Mr. Rob Yulfo, for saying words and things. You can and should follow him at Rob Yulfo on Twitter and his brand new, but not updated at all, website, MrRobYulfo.com. That's MrRobyUlfo.com. And I'm Stephen Brooks. I'm the Rubber Onion. You can follow me at Rubber Onion everywhere, like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, Google+, Newground, SoundCloud, and Instagram. Where, as I said in the intro to this show, is where you post your animation battle entries for this month. The topic for July is mustache problems. How can you not want to animate something based on mustache problems? It's an amazing topic. Thank you for voting for it. I'm so happy. Anyone can participate. The rules are to make it 15 seconds or less and post it on Instagram under the hashtag RubberOnionBattle by midnight your local time on the last day of the month. The winner gets a prize of some sort. Don't know what it is yet, but you'll get something. You can pre-order my animation/program instructional book on Amazon right now. It's called Tradigital Animate CC, and it's through respected art education publisher Focal Press. Thanks to all my patrons for helping make this show and others like it possible. If you want to support Rubber Onion, I remind you to check me out on patreon.com/RubberOnion. If you want to support without giving money, rate and review us on iTunes or at Rubber Onion, all one word. RubberOnion. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like it, subscribe, tell your friends about it, and don't forget to say hi. Bye.